Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to MST.TV. In today's episode, we are going to take a look at some of the Link monsters that were just released to the OCG in Link Vrains Pack 3. So in addition to Crystron Needlefiber, right, we're also going to be getting some of these cards in the TCG when Duel Overload drops here in March of 2020. So far, from what we have confirmed for the set, we're getting at least 5 different cards from Link Vrains Pack 3 being imported, so there's a very good chance that we're going to see more of them confirmed as time goes on. So I know that this isn't like a market watch, but one of the ways that I look at what cards to invest in now is by examining the cards and archetypes that are going to be coming out in the future. Hopefully by identifying what cards and strategies are going to be good, we can find cards that are underpriced at the moment and invest in them now. Also, at the very least, it is always a good idea to have an idea of what cards are going to be coming into the game so that you can know how to play against them, or maybe try to find a way to incorporate them into your own decks. So yeah, today we're going to be looking at 10 of the different Link monsters from Link Vrains Pack 3. The other half of them are going to be coming to you guys sometime early next week. Let's get started. Alright, so first up we have Predaplant, Verte, Anaconda. So we're probably starting off with like the best monster in the set. So this card is a Link 2 that can be made with any 2 effect monsters, and it does have 2 effects. The first one, it can turn a face-up monster on the field to a dark monster, which is whatever. It stops, like, you can play around honest, I guess. The other effect though is what makes this card broken. So you can pay 2,000 life points and then send a normal or quick play spell from your deck to the graveyard that either has fusion or polymerization in its name, and then you can use that card effect as this card's effect. I think the big one here is, of course, super polymerization, where you can fuse monsters on your opponent's board. It only copies the effect, so you don't have to discard as cost, and they can't respond to it. Obviously really big. There are a couple of other things, like I think that Shaddoll Fusion could be really interesting in Shaddolls, or Miracle Fusion in something like Heroes. It really helps like a lot of different fusion based strategies in certain situations. Also, as a more meta option, I think the thing that we should definitely consider is that, like, if you already have Dingirsu on board, then you can use Anaconda's effect to copy instant fusion, bring out Winda, and then detach a material from Dingirsu to save the Winda and keep it on the field. Now, a very important restriction is that you cannot special summon after you use Anaconda's effect, which is really big because it stops you from being able to like combo off and do anything like really crazy with the monster that you bring out. Now, despite that, this is definitely one of the best and most exciting cards to look forward to from Link Vrains Pack 3. Next up, for our Ancient Gear Link monster, we have Ancient Gear Ballistic Shooter. Now, this is a Link 2 that requires 2 Earth Machine type monsters, so fairly specific requirements. When it is Link summoned, you get to search for any Ancient Gear monster from your deck, which is kind of cool. So Ancient Gears are a deck that focus on pushing for a lot of damage at once and OTKing your opponent, and I believe that they typically do so by summoning a fusion monster, so being able to search for something to use as fusion material is pretty cool. It does have another effect that allows you to pop one of your own spells or traps to reduce your opponent's monster's attack points and defense points to 0, which does help to set up those OTKs. The pop is also very important because if you pop something like Gear Town or like Ancient Gear Fortress, you do get to pull a monster out of the deck as well. Now, my problem with this card is I don't know how easily the deck can put those multiple monsters on board to make this card, as well as have enough fusion materials in order to put something on board to OTK your opponent with. So I think that if you do go for both, there's a chance that you're going to be a bit tighter on resources. But yeah, nevertheless, like, having something that you can search any monster with is definitely really good for the Ancient Gear deck, and I think it's a very solid option as just a Link 2. Now let's talk about arguably one of the most broken cards in the set, Union Carrier. So this is a Link 2 monster that requires just 2 monsters with the same type and attribute, which is pretty easy conditions to meet. Now, it can't be used as a Link material during the turn in which it's summoned, so you're probably ending your board with this card on the field. Now, its effect is you can equip a monster from your deck to a monster on your field where they both have the same type and attribute, and then boost the equipped monster's attack by 1,000. This is a very versatile effect that can be used in a lot of ways, since you still get to link with the monster that is equipped, and then you get both cards into the graveyard from the field. So if you're playing this in something like ABC, you can still link off the piece that you have on the field, and both pieces go to the graveyard, so you get both of their effects. Another thing that I've seen this card used with is Eva, where you get to search for the Herald negates, Herald of orange light, green light, or purple light. However, I think the most ridiculous application of this card is using it to equip Dragon Buster Destruction Sword from the deck to a Dark Dragon, which literally just like locks your opponent out of their extra deck for free. This is a really crazy effect, since usually that means your opponent has to be playing some sort of like back row removal in order to break the lock, which not everyone does, especially without being able to access your extra deck. Being able to get this card up so easily and set up the lock for free just seems silly, especially since you can equip this card to something like Dark Arm Dragon or Chaos Dragon Levianeer. Hopefully this indicates that there will be some sort of hit to the Dragon Link deck, as I think this combo would really push that deck over the top. So even though we were just talking about a Buster Blader themed monster, we actually do have a different card that is direct support for the Buster Blader archetype. Companion Whelp of the Destruction Swordsman is a Link 2 that can be summoned with any 2 monsters, though its effect really specifically requires a bunch of Buster Blader themed cards in the deck, so we don't really have to worry about it being abused. So when it is Link summoned, you do get to dump a Destruction Sword from your deck to the graveyard, and then you also have the option to summon a Buster Blader monster from your hand. Note that that summon is optional, so even if you don't have one in hand, you can still dump a card like Destruction Sword Memories in order to use its graveyard effect. Now, from what I've seen, this card does enable some pretty cool combos between the 2 trap cards, Destruction Sword Memories and Prologue of the Destruction Swordsman. Buster Blader has always had a pretty cute lock that can catch people off guard and steal games if they don't know how to play around it, so maybe this card will help make the deck a little bit more viable. Now, the Link does have another effect where you can, at the end of your battle phase, burn your opponent for damage equal to the attack points of one of your Buster Blader monsters that did not declare an attack that turn. So I guess the effect can be pretty useful in time, or if you want to play around your opponent's back row to go for game, it is something nice that the deck can have access to, although I think that in general, it's not an effect that we're really going to try to use like too often with this deck. Overall though, I think that the first effect is definitely very helpful for the deck in setting up its lock, and it really helps to improve the consistency of the Buster Blader deck. Okay, so now we're on to Herald of Mirages. So this is a Link 2 that requires 2 monsters with the same type and attribute, relatively simple. It has 2 effects. First, you can send a fairy from your hand to the graveyard to negate a spell, trap, or effect and destroy that card. Now, unfortunately, this is a once per turn effect, but on the other hand, it is very easy to put that negate onto the board. Obviously with Heralds, you're already like negating a lot of things, but hopefully if you're going second, this card can allow you to push through back row a bit more easily if you can get the bodies onto the board. Now, its second effect is that if your opponent sends it to the graveyard, you can add a combination of 2 ritual monsters or spells with different names from your graveyard to your hand. This is pretty cool because it can add back both pieces for you to set up a ritual summon again if you expect your board to get broken, or it can add back 2 different fairies for you to discard with the effect of Herald of Perfection and get more negates. So yeah, I think this card is definitely like a pretty cool option for Herald decks. The only thing I'm worried about is that you have to invest bodies into getting this card onto the board, which means that you have fewer cards in hand to negate things with. However, I do think that it does open a lot of plays for something like the Agent of Creation Venus, where you can make a pretty easy negate and still have shine balls left on the field to perform Link plays with. I think that in Herald, it's definitely something that you're going to want to play and at least have access to, since you don't really use your extra deck that much anyways, but whether or not it actually gets summoned very often kind of depends on how the deck evolves moving forward. Next up, we have Simorgh, Bird of Kings, which is a Link 3 monster that requires 2 or more monsters where just one of the materials has to be a winged beast. So this card has a few effects. One, it stops itself and winged beast that it points to from being targeted, which I guess helps against things like Valor or Infinite Impermanence. 2, if this card would be destroyed, you can destroy a Simorgh card you control instead, which is cool because it gives this card a bit of protection. And 3, this is the really cool effect. During the end phase, you get to special summon a winged beast from your hand or deck with a level equal to or lower than the number of unoccupied spell and trap zones on the field. So theoretically, this card can summon a level 10 winged beast, though I'm not sure if I can think of a level 10 winged beast monster off the top of my head. But yeah, if you're going first, this means you can summon at least a level 5 for sure because of your opponent's 5 spell or trap zones, probably a few more since I don't know how much back row you're going to be playing in this deck. What you can summon depends on how you build your deck. I believe that the 2 most popular options at the moment are Dark Simorgh, which you can combine with Anti-Spell Fragrance to lock your opponent out of spells completely, and then Barrier Statue of the Stormwinds, which is a bit weak, but it stops your opponent from special summoning anything other than wind attribute monsters. Also, if you summon it and have Simorgh point to it, then your opponent can't infinite impermanence the Barrier Statue, which is kind of cool. So the one thing I do want to say about this card is that it's very draining on the deck's resources. Like realistically, I think that if you make this card, you're ending your board with like this in the extra monster zone, the monster that you summon, and then 1 or 2 other cards. If you do draw the right combination of cards, it can be very, very strong. However, while the card itself is pretty good, I don't think that it's going to make Simorgh a tier 1 deck anytime soon. Alright, so surprise, surprise, we have more hero support. I swear, we get new hero support with basically every product that comes out, but I guess like the archetype is super popular, so it makes sense from Konami's perspective. Anyways, we now have extra hero Hell Divisor, which is a Link 2 that can only be summoned by using 2 hero monsters. Now, unfortunately, this card isn't nearly as game-breaking as something like Cross Crusader. When it's Link summoned, you get to reveal a hero fusion monster from your extra deck, and then search for 2 names that are listed on that card from your deck and add them to your hand. Now this means that if you reveal something like Electrum, you can search for 2 of Avion, Burstinatrix, Clayman, or Bubbleman. However, you cannot reveal Absolute Zero and then search for any water monster and any hero monster. That would just be silly. So I believe this card is actually meant to be evil hero support, technically, as it does have an effect that gives a few hundred extra attack points to fiends that it points to, but that's not really relevant. But yeah, if you're playing like a casual build with your friends where you really want to use like the original elemental heroes and Electrum or something, go ahead. But if you're playing it like an up-to-date with the meta hero deck, chances are you're not going to be looking anywhere near this card at all. Our next card is Selene, the Sacred Empress of Magic. So this is a Link 3 monster that requires 2 or more monsters, where at least one of the monsters is a spellcaster. Now the first thing to note, this card has really good Link arrows, opening up all 3 zones underneath it when it's in the extra monster zone. Because of this alone, I think the card will almost definitely see play in Pendulum Magicians, opening up 3 zones for you to pendulum summon into from your extra deck. This is especially true because you can make it by using Electrumite and then any Pendulum Magician monster, so it flows very naturally with the deck strategy. Now it is technically also an Endymion card, so it does have an effect where it gets a spell counter for each spell on the field and in both players' graveyards. So if you have looked at recent Pendulum builds where they play cards like Into the Void in order to get spell counters on Servant of Endymion, you know there's probably going to be quite a few spells in the graveyard, at least your own. Now it also can't be attacked while you control an Endymion card, kind of a whatever effect. And then its final effect is that during the main phase as a quick effect, so during either player's turn, you can remove 3 spell counters from the field to summon a spellcaster from your hand or graveyard to a zone that this card points to. So overall, I think the first and last effect are definitely going to serve 2 different but very useful functions. I think that because it can get so many spell counters on it so easily, it is almost definitely going to be used and abused by someone with Tempest Magician to set up those like really easy OTKs. And then also its ability to bring back any spellcaster means that it can also be used as a combo extender. One video that I did see people using this card in was with Spirals, where you revive Master Plan with it, which in my opinion sounds pretty broken because you do get that search effect again when it leaves the field and Link off with it. So yeah, I think this is definitely like low-key one of the more underrated cards in the set, and it's definitely gonna be abused by a number of different things in the future when it finally does come to the TCG. Next up, we have Crossroads Dragon. This one is another Link 2 monster that requires 2 monsters with different types. So its first effect is a quick effect that allows you to tribute itself and then 1 plant monster to summon a rose or plant type synchro monster from your extra deck as a synchro summon. I think primarily you're going to be summoning either Black Rose Dragon or Black Rose Moonlight Dragon so that you can disrupt your opponent during their turn. Now, as cute as I think this is, it's honestly pretty underwhelming since you basically have to give up 3 monsters just to make Black Rose. Its other effect activates in the graveyard. You can banish it when a monster you control is destroyed to summon a Rose Dragon from your graveyard. Now, unfortunately, Black Rose Dragon only gets its effect when it's synchro summoned, so you don't get its effect this way. There are a couple of other cards you can summon, right? Like you can summon Blue Rose Dragon or White Rose Dragon, but really, this has never been like a really big archetype. There's not really enough to make a full competitive deck with just cards from this archetype. The Link monster, along with the other cards from the archetype, were definitely just made to appeal to fans of the anime. And finally, guys, the last card we're gonna look at in this video, we have Wujin hashima. So this is the Wujin Link monster, but I feel like it actually functions pretty well as generic support for Xyz based archetypes. It is a Link 2 monster that requires 2 monsters with the same level to make it, which is pretty fitting, to be honest. Also, it cannot be used as Link material itself. I feel like this card really tries to restrict you into just making one Xyz monster because of the way its Link arrows are positioned, which I guess is consistent with the Wujin archetype. So when this card is Link summoned, you get to special summon 1 monster from your hand, 1 monster from your graveyard that both have the same level. You negate their effects, but then you overlay them. Also, if an Xyz card that this card points to activates its effect by detaching a material, you get to pop one of your opponent's spell or trap cards. So the pop here is nice, but the big thing is that you get like a free Xyz out of it. So obviously this card is supposed to work in Wujins, an archetype where you typically have cards in your hand and in your graveyard to support the monster on your field, right? You have like Crane in hand and then Turtle or Hare in the graveyard. I actually did see a pretty interesting way of using this card where you play Black Garden and you make Susanoo to attack all of the tokens that you've given to your opponent. Definitely seems interesting, but nothing that I would really consider to be like meta or top tier or necessarily viable. I do think, however, that the card will see some sort of play with something generic like Raid Raptor Forstrix. In order to search for an additional extender, you would just need to find a way to get rid of a hashima after using the effect, right? Because you can't link it off, so that you can free up the link zones after. So yeah, maybe this card isn't like the best card from the set and not exactly what Wujins are looking for, but it's definitely an interesting card in theory, and I hope that it can see play in the future. Alright guys, that is it for this video today. I wanted to do all of the Link monsters in a single video, but it was way too long because there's so much to say about every single card in each archetype. So this video is being split into 2 parts. The next one will be posted sometime early next week, so please stay tuned for that. Make sure that you guys hit that notification bell and make sure that you've subscribed. Also guys, please leave a thumbs up on the video and leave a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think about the Link monsters that we are getting in Link Vrains Pack 3, which ones you think will be imported to the TCG in Duel Overload, and what you guys are most excited to see. And yeah, that's everything for now guys, so until next time, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.